am Lilian with Lillylegal, where we help our clients get status for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So today I want to talk to you about how to prepare for your naturalization, or for basic term, citizenship. Right? You have your green card. Now you want to apply for citizenship, naturalization, and how do you even prepare for that? Where do you start? What do you need to know? That's what I will be covering today. If you would like to schedule a time to speak with me, you can do that by going to my website, lillylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. So let's jump right in. What are the citizenship requirements? Let's start there, right? Because you have to meet the requirements before you even get to applying, right? So the first requirement is you must have your permanent residency for at least 5 years or 3 years if you are married to a U.S. citizen, okay? 5 years or 3 years if you are married to a U.S. citizen. If you haven't reached either of those, naturalization is not the door for you yet. You still have to wait. The second thing is you must, there's no exceptions, to be a naturalized citizen of the United States, you must be at least 18 years old. Okay, because you have to take the oath of allegiance, you have to take, you have to go through all this process. They want you to be an adult. They want you to be an adult, or legally an adult, to take that oath, and for the oath to be legally binding, right? That's the thing. If you're signing and saying that you're going to bear arms for the U.S., if that, happens to be the case one day, all those things are on the naturalization application. You're signing, saying that you agree to it. For that to be binding on you, you must be 18, because that's when you can enter into a legal contract. So think about it that way. It's not that they're limiting you, but because of the contract that you're basically entering into, you have to be of an age where you can be held liable on your contracts. So 18 is the number. You must be 18 in order to meet this requirement. Next, you have to show physical presence. This is where people start asking me all these questions. This is where people start remembering all the times they've traveled and stayed outside of the country for more than 6 months at a time, or even close to a year. And some people have been outside of the US for over a year and are able to come back in, but they think they can just apply for citizenship because they have had their green card for the 5 years that's required. Well, the physical presence requirement kind of puts a dent on that. So physical presence means that the individual must have actually been physically present in the US. It means exactly what it says, physical presence. You have to have been physically present in the US for a certain number of months. So for the 5-year requirement, it's 30 months. So it's half, 2.5 years, basically, that you have to physically be in the US. And you have to show through documentation, or so on the form, right? On the N400 form for naturalization, it asks you to list every single time you have been outside of the US. So if you went to Canada, it doesn't matter where you went. If it's outside of the US or it's not a US territory, you have to put it there. And it asks you not only where did you go, but when did you leave the US? When did you return to the US? So that's how that calculation is done. Okay? If you calculate and you're mathing, USCIS will look at that and be like, well, you don't qualify because your math is not lining up with that 30-month requirement, right? You were out of the country for 40 months out of the, out of the 5 years. So for that reason, you don't qualify yet. You have to wait. So keep that in mind, that you do have to, do some math. You do have to remember every time you've left the US, the date you left and the date that you came back, so that the calculations can be done properly and that you are not going to an interview or paying to apply for naturalization when you don't actually qualify for it. Keep that in mind. The fees are non-refundable. I say this all the time and people always look at me like I'm crazy, but there's a reason I say that. The fees for naturalization is $725. It's $725. And if your math is wrong, you just wasted $725. So it's really important that not only do you look at the time you were out, but you look at your dates. Make sure your dates are right. I've had people like, give me your passport, right? If you've only had one passport since you got your green card, give me your passport. Let's look it up. Let's see how many times you've actually been in the US according to US immigration system, according to your passport. We cross-reference everything to make sure that we don't miss one date, because one date can mess up your whole application. Okay, and remember, like I said, that fee is non-refundable. Once USCIS accepts your application, so when they're accepting your application, it doesn't mean that they actually went through and did the math already. No, an officer still has to go through and do the math. So just keep that in mind. They will accept the application, they'll process it, and then they'll deny it because you don't meet the requirements. So keep an eye on that. Now, the next thing is you have to show continuous permanent residency in the US. Continuous permanent residency in the US. So not only have you physically been in the US, but you have made the US your home. Okay? You have not left the US for a long period of time. So for example, if you have been outside of the US for 6 months or more, there's a presumption, there's a, this person probably is trying, this is not their permanent residence anymore. And you don't want that presumption. You really don't. The other thing is, if you have been outside of the US for a year or more, it cuts your continuous physical presence. Okay? 1 year or more, you have to start over. Sorry. So if you decide to travel, you're outside of the US for a year and 10 days, and you come back, and before you left, you already accrued like the 5 years, and now that you're back, you want to go ahead and file, you can't. Because once you were outside for a year, for longer than a year, all that 5 years of continuous permanent residency goes away. You basically have to start over on the 5 years again. So, sorry. Okay. I say sorry because I know people this has affected. COVID has affected people in this type of way where they are forced to remain outside of the US, and there's really nothing to fix that when it comes to the continued presence, because although when you get to the airport, the CBP officer is most likely going to ask you why you were outside. If it's COVID related, if you have proof that it was COVID related, they will let you back in. They won't give you, they shouldn't give you a bunch of issues on that. But when it comes to naturalization, that 1 year out is not waived. You are still forced to start over with your 3 years or your 5 years. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If you are going to be outside of the US, make sure it's not for a year or more, because then you have to start your physical, your continuous permanent residency all over again, which then means the physical presence all over again. Because the physical presence is looking at the past 5 years. So if you're applying today, it looks back 5 years from today. So if you cut your permanent residency in 2020 and you have to start all over again in 2021, any physical presence you had before that doesn't count. You basically have to start all over again. So it's really important that you pay attention to that and you don't fall into that little trap right there. Okay. Now, you can apply for citizenship, naturalization within 90 days, right? 90 days before you reach your 5 year. Okay, so let's say your 5 years is in August. I'm trying to do math in my head. So, so if it's August 1st, that means 90 days before that, you can actually go ahead and file your application. So you don't have to hit the 5 years right on the dot. You can do it 90 days before you hit the 5 years. So just give the same thing for the 3 years, okay? Keep that in mind. That's a good thing about that. You don't have to wait. You can do it 90 days before the 5th year or the 3rd year. Now, the next thing is you must show good moral character. This is one of my favorites to talk about because this can really mess with you. The USCIS officer that's interviewing you will make the decision on good moral character. That's just what it is, right? You can present documentation to show that you do have good moral character, but the officer makes the decision of whether you actually do or not. So that's the fun part. So letting the officer know, I do have good moral character. Hold on, let me show you. But what does that actually mean? Most of the time it boils down to criminal history, taxes, owing the IRS taxes and not paying, child support, owing child support and not paying. Ooh, those are the 3 main ones that will get you every single time. Okay, if you have an open criminal charge, that means it has not been dismissed, you have not been found not guilty, it's still going on, that is not the time to file for citizenship. Because the USCIS officer is basically like, okay, I don't know whether to approve you or not because this case is still open. And because the case is still open, you could be, this could affect your good moral character, or it couldn't. So if you were found not guilty, then it wouldn't affect good moral character. But if you were found guilty, it will affect good moral character. So it's really important to bear that in mind. If you have an open charge, if you have an open criminal case, do not file for citizenship, do not file for naturalization until that charge is closed out in your favor. If it's not closed out in your favor, talk to an immigration lawyer. Make sure it's not going to affect your ability to remain a permanent resident. When at that point, you don't even want to think about citizenship. Don't think about naturalization. Think about, is this going to affect me being able to remain a permanent resident of the United States? That's the question there, okay? So for the taxes, if you owe the IRS and you do not have a payment plan with the IRS, get a payment plan with the IRS to pay your taxes and actually make payments on the payment plan. I can't stress this enough. Getting a payment plan is not enough. You have to actually show that you're making payments on that payment plan. If you're not making payments on the payment plan, then you still owe the IRS, right? You're still showing that you don't have good moral character because not only did you try to circumvent the whole thing by getting a payment plan, but you're still not even paying it. So it's not really helpful. Okay, if you're going to do the payment plan, actually make payments on the payment plan. And the same thing goes for child support. Okay, you have to show that if you have children, that you are supporting your children, whether there's a court order or not. So if there's no court order saying that you have to support your children, it does not matter. It does not matter, because USCIS will still look at whether you are supporting your children. Okay, so if you have children that are not living with you, this is something to keep in mind. If they're living with you, it's not going to be a problem, because it's assumed that if they're living with you, you have custody, you are providing for them, right? If they don't live with you, then there is a presumption that you should be taking care of them, especially if they're minors, right? If they are minors, there's an expectation that you're taking care of them. So provide documentation that you're taking care of them. And this applies whether the children are in the US or outside of the US. I've had this come up. Like, everything I'm telling you, I've had it come up. So take it for what it is. If you have children outside of the US that are minors and you're applying for naturalization, most of the time in these other countries, there may not be a court-ordered child support. But you still have to show that you're taking care of your children. Because if you're not taking care of your children, then that means you lack good moral character, and the officer can deny your case just based on that. So pay attention to that. If you're in those situations, talk to an immigration lawyer before you make any moves towards applying for naturalization. Okay, so next thing, you have to pass that interview. Okay, so now you've met all the requirements: the physical presence, the continuous permanent residency. You've met the 5 years requirement or the 3 years. You have the good moral character. You filed. Your application is being processed. Now you get to the interview. At the interview, you have to demonstrate the following things: that you have the ability to read, write, and speak basic English. Okay, basic English. I can't stress this enough, because some people will, think they have to be like PhD level English. No, basic English. And you have to have a basic knowledge of US history and civics. The US history and civics is actually easy, because USCIS can only ask you questions from a list of 100. Okay, there's a list of 100. It's available on their website. They have videos, they have audio, they have flashcards, they have an app where you can, get questions asked to you. And then they have the written version as well. So however you learn, they have it available to make sure that you are able to study and that you are able to pass this test. So again, read, write, speak basic English, and basic knowledge of US history and civics. If you are not able to read, write, and speak basic English, there are exceptions. One of them is medical related, so your doctor will have to fill out a whole form, basically attesting to what your medical condition is that prevents you, right? The medical condition that prevents you from being able to learn basic English or the civics. Okay, so that's really important. I've done this for a few of my clients that do have some mental health issues, or they do have medical conditions that make it impossible basically for them to retain information, such as the early onset dementia and things like that. Or if this person has had a stroke and just their memory is not that good, we can document that through their doctor and use that to waive some of these requirements as far as the reading, writing, and speaking English. If your reading, writing, and speaking English is waived and you speak a different language other than English, you may be able to do your interview in that other language. Okay, so that is the interview. The interview typically starts with this. If you fail this, the officer is going to move forward and go over the rest of your application. But if you fail the reading, the writing, or the speaking, or the civics, the officer will schedule you for another appointment because they can't grant you citizenship because, unfortunately, you failed one of the tests. So you have to come back and retake the civics or the English if that's the one you failed. Okay, if you come back for your second interview and you fail again, then the officer can deny your application. If you pass at the second interview, then the officer can approve your application and set you up for the swearing in. Okay, and then the final step, of course, is the oath of allegiance, taking the oath of allegiance. Sometimes that will be done either in a group setting. So when COVID was at its peak, they were doing same day swearing in so that it will be a smaller group of people instead of a whole, I've seen them do like a stadium full, a courtroom full. So for these situations, they try to, because of COVID, they do try to do smaller spaces, but they are slowly going back to doing a larger venue for the swearing-in ceremonies. So just keep that in mind. If you're scheduled for an oath ceremony and you're not able to make it, there is a way for you to go ahead and ask for another date, okay? Do not just miss your oath ceremony, because then until you take the oath ceremony, let me repeat that. Until you take the oath of allegiance, you are not a U.S. citizen, even though you passed the actual test, right? Even though your application was approved, you do not actually become a U.S. citizen until you take that oath of allegiance and you get your certificate of naturalization. So keep that in mind. And once you get your certificate of naturalization, you can go ahead and apply for a passport. Okay, once you get your passport, you can travel. You're now full-fledged U.S. citizen. You get all the benefits of having a U.S. passport to travel to some countries visa-free. So that is how you prepare for your naturalization, making sure that you meet the requirements, and making sure you're prepared for your interview. Remember, for the civics and U.S. history, there is a whole lot of resources available for you to study. You can download the audio, listen to it in your car. You can do the flashcards. You can download the apps so you can test yourself. You can do all of that. So make sure that that's not what stops you from becoming a naturalized citizen. And there are exceptions. If you can't meet this requirement, but you think you meet an exception and you want to talk to me about it, go ahead, schedule a time. We'll see if you do meet the exception and how to document that you meet the exception. Okay, so that is all I have for you today. Like I said, if you want to schedule a time with me, you can do that. All my contact information will be in the description to this video. And once again, thank you for your time today. And remember, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you know someone who needs to hear this, go ahead and share the video with them. And if you are watching in a place where you can subscribe and you don't want to miss any of my uploads, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And once again, I am Lilian Chukura. I am the owner of Lillylegal, where we do immigration law and we do it well. Bye for now.